By the way, this will be recorded, so if anybody wants to hear this back later, this will be posted back on the FM Academy, FileMaker Academy website. So my name is Matt Navarre, and I'm with a company called AppWorks, formerly MSN Media in Portland, Oregon. And today we're going to be talking about fmLog, which is a utility that we wrote and we've been using in pretty much all of our databases for several years now. I've been a database developer for a very long time. Our company is a Platinum. I'm certified in all 9 versions of FileMaker that have certification. And one of the things I love to do for pleasure is the FileMaker Talk podcast with Matt Petrowski, which is free. So you can check that out if you haven't heard that before. For hobbies, I like to travel around. I ride my bike. I have built guitars and play guitar frequently. Those are my nieces. Good picture I took of them. These questions here are the questions we're really going to be focusing on. This is reminded to me that these are the same questions that you're assigned when you write a paper in school. But in this particular context, what I want to know from each of you, you don't have to answer like in the questions, but can you answer who and what is being done in all of the databases that you work on, where it's being done, why it's being done, when and how things are being done to your databases? We found that a lot of our customers can't really answer that to any of those, let alone all of them. So let's just dive in a quick demo of what fmLog is. And this is the file that you get when you download it from our website. So over here on the right, we see a portal with a bunch of audit log history that's been built in this file. And if I just click on the demo screen, I get into a company record. So if I go to the company list and I view any of these records, that would be one example of a log record. So what happens there if I just do find all and click on one here like this one. Simply by viewing the record, I've created a log history like you'd have in like a HIPAA compliant system, for example, saying that on such and such date and time, this record was viewed. Also, if I do something like make a change here, like add this address and make it to 2 lines, as soon as I do that, another log record gets created saying that I've done that, and that's applied to all of the fields on the layout. Furthermore, if I say I don't want this record anymore and delete it, that record is now gone. That's one log record. I viewed another record. So if I went to my raw log table, my auto log table, I can scroll to the last records and see here's the deletion of the record, and here's the other record that I made when I viewed a record. So that's kind of a quick overview of what this thing does. And very, very simple to add and use. Okay, so let's talk about what is involved in that. So first of all, what is fmLog? So it's free. Very, very light, super easy to integrate, like just a couple of minutes, as we'll see. And it tracks several different things that you do in the database, either layouts, scripts, all kinds of things that you can do. Also, as we saw just now, tracks edits of data, deletion of data, creation of data, exporting, anything. Why do this? I have found that there's almost every case with customers that there comes a time that you want to know what happened to the database. Who deleted this record? Who modified this record? Who changed this thing? And if you just use the FileMaker built-in tools of tracking the modification date and time and user, that only tells you the very last change, but it doesn't tell you all the other things that happened in between that. And so putting a login at the beginning allows you to have it before you need the information and to know exactly what is being done and who's doing it. A good example of that is tracking a session by a user. So when someone opens the file and then closes the file, you can track the duration that they were in it and then have a session record. So who and what? That's tracking the user ID. So if you have a system that has user IDs, or if you're just using the IP address or the MAC address, one we use a lot is the persistent ID of the device, which is a unique ID that's set up on a iOS device or a web browser for WebDirect or a computer for FileMaker Pro. The what would be tracking what you're doing. And as we'll see in configuring the log is really only one area that you have to spend any time from record to record, and that is typing in English what is being done in the log. Where? So we've got Latin long on an iOS device. Why is an interesting one because it's not one you'd maybe would guess you'd see. And that would be For example, if you're doing something like deleting a record or exporting records or something that has a security connotation, pop up a dialog box and say, why are you doing this? Please give me a short answer, and then log that answer in addition to the action that the user is taking. When, we've got the server timestamp, client timestamp, universal time, all kinds of different ways to track that. How would be what device did this? So did you delete that record by logging in from WebDirect, or did you delete it by logging in from FileMaker Pro, 15 on a whatever model computer? So what are the moving parts of fmLog? So it's just a single table that you copy and paste in with 6 fields. And there's a lot of different ways that you can integrate this into your solution. But mainly it would go into the data file, or if you just have a one file solution, obviously there. That automatically, when you put that table in, creates one layout, and the scripts act on that layout. And then there's 2 scripts that come in, and really one script is the one that does the work, and the other one calls the worker script. In that method, it's compatible with basically every single version of FileMaker, Pro, Go, WebDirect, everything. And Perform Script on Server, PSOS, is fully supported as well. The other moving parts are it uses the UUID, the get UUID function in FileMaker to create your primary key. So each log record actually can have children records. It has an ID. And then the foreign key either can use whatever ID in whatever table in your system, like a account ID or invoice ID, or it can also use a UUID for the foreign key field. Tracks the type of record being made, and then the log entry is a human-readable English log. Those are really the foreign key, the type, and the log text are the only 3 things that you really need to set. Creator name and timestamp sort of come along automatically because that's just a built-in FileMaker feature. For integration, no external anything, so it's just basic FileMaker. It takes about 3 minutes to copy the information in, the script and the table. It's extremely light. So on testing I did earlier on an AWS server, like for example, what you might build in FileMaker Cloud released today, you can get around 600 log entries created per second on a really very small, inexpensive server because it's very light. Okay, so what do you do for tracking login? So if you're not doing this already in your files, this would be, I think, a really good place to start. And that would be the on first window open and on last window close type scripts. Track all of your usage of your database. And then you can also, on that login script, you can track some environmental variables like what's the IP address, what printer do they print to, what's the screen resolution, little things like that are really good to know about your user. So if you need to look later on and find out how many of your users are still using lower resolution screens, or can we actually update our application to being a higher resolution main screen, this is a way you can answer that question. On script execution, so you can call the fmLog system with just a single script call, and then you can learn which scripts are in use, and super importantly, which are not in use. So you can get a report out of the system that you would build and determine that you've got, of the 100 scripts in your solution, really only 20 have ever been used in the last year. And so you can kind of know that the other ones are safe to get rid of. Also, chart how frequently those scripts are used. So very, very simple to use. So as we see in that last bullet point here, the single script step that you use to call fmLog is called with multiple parameters. Another common use of this is on layout load, on record load, I should say. So when a user is, actually, no, this is layout load. So when you go to a layout, it tracks viewing that layout. And then if looking at a whole bunch of different records on that layout, only one log entry is made. In this way, you can track which layouts are used and which are not. And then the next one is on record load. So if you're looking at individual records, you can track which records have been seen. So if your system maybe has 10,000 records in it and you have no idea which ones have ever been looked at by people, this will give you, in a really simple way, actually even on a portal, the way to know the answer of which records are used and which are not. That's super important in public health and medical type systems where HIPAA applies. And as we saw in our demo, you can display that right in the portal, very convenient. Add, change, delete would track usage of your system. So if a user is creating a new value in a field, or editing a value in a field, or deleting a record, those things can all be very, very simply tracked as well. The benefit of this is everything is done by script triggers on the layout, so you're only tracking the changes to the fields that you care about. If you have other fields that are really inconsequential, I mean, obviously they're still important in your database, but they're not things that you really want to know a complete audit history of, then you don't need to track those ones. You just track the ones that are really important to you. So now we're going to talk about kind of what the moving parts of this are. I'm going to actually integrate this into the FileMaker invoices file. So I've got that file here on my desktop, invoices. And so the only changes I've made to this are to put a couple of test records into it. So I go to my dashboard. If I go to my invoice, if, for example, one of the things I want to track here is this record being viewed? That would be like our first test. But to start with that, let's actually go ahead and integrate log into here. So what we do is we go to our log database. And I'm going to go to the Manage Database and select my fmLog table, copy it to the clipboard, go into Invoices, and paste. If you don't have FileMaker Pro Advanced, you can use the Import Table option. But in FileMaker Advanced, you can just copy and paste. Okay, that automatically makes a layout in my invoices file, which now is empty. Oh, I have one that I had made previously too in a test of this. And there's no records in it yet. Okay, the second thing I do is in my log, there's a folder. I'll just take that whole folder, copy it to the clipboard, go to my scripts and paste that folder in. And now that's it. I've now completely integrated all of the parts from fmLog into my solution. And if I wanted to, I could close this file and never look at it again. It does have a couple of other things that might be useful though, and that is taking a look at sample data. So for example, I mentioned that I wanted to copy the feature that tracks when a record is viewed. So to do that, I would go to my layout and click on the little pencil to see my script triggers. And I can see that there's an on-record load in here. And it runs a script called send log entry parameter. And then here's where I can kind of take a look exactly at what the code is involved in this. So it's sending the ID of the record I'm looking at, the type, which is just something I determine. You can set that to be whatever you want. And the log text is, what did you actually do? In this case, I viewed the company and then the name of the company. So I'm just going to copy those things to the clipboard just so I don't have to type them. Go over to my invoices file, which is here. Navigate to my invoice record. Go to my script triggers, and I'll notice that there's already a trigger in here called view invoice record. So if I go to my script, I've got this script already there. And this already has some features in it. And one of the things that they do is they actually check to see if script triggers are off, and then they exit. So I really want to put my code in above that so that it's always run. And my code is really simple. It's just perform script. And the script that I'm running is in my fmLog folder. It's called send log entry. And then the parameters that I'm going to send are right here. So I just paste that stuff in. And then the only thing that I need to do to modify this is the ID is not going to be the company ID, which is what it was in our sample file. It's going to be the invoice ID. The type is still going to be record view. And the log is now going to be view invoice. And rather than the company name, I'm going to actually put, actually it's still the company name, isn't it? I can put like the company name, and I could also put something else in there too if I wanted to, like the terms, or any other field in the database that I choose to do. Actually, I think invoice date would be better. Date. And I'll maybe put the word date in there as well. So just by doing that, I'm going to now turn script debugger on so we can actually watch this work. By simply going to browse mode on this record, it performs the log, and this is the script that calls the log script. And this script is smart, so it actually understands if the file is hosted, and if it's hosted, it automatically runs the script server side, which is less weight, it's faster. And if it's not, then it runs it locally. So it runs that second script in one of two ways, basically, either locally or server-side. That makes it automatically work for FileMaker Go. It automatically works in sync solutions. Very simple. And so now I'm in my second script. The kind of ridiculous thing about fmLog is this is it. These lines of code right here are kind of the whole thing. And I think that the feature that we were really going for with fmLog is to distill this down to the smallest possible thing to make it most flexible, most extensible, and the easiest to manage that we could think of. So first of all, these two scripts here are these two set variable commands are kind of black box. They basically just interpret the multiple parameters, and you really don't need to mess with those. In fact, you don't need to mess with this script at all. It's pretty much gets all of its parameters sent to it. Goes to the log layout, makes a record, and sets those three fields: view record, view the information, and then automatically timestamp or the information for the user who's doing it. That's it. So I can actually flip through my records. I'll go ahead and get out of debugger. And I can just flip through from record to record to record back and forth. And if I go to my log, I'll see all those log records are being created really quickly. The next thing I think would be good to do would be that login and log out system. So I'll also copy and paste those. If I take a look at my example script, I have an on-open example. Now there's one really important thing to know about this one is if you use server-side scripting, if you're going to support the perform script on server, if your file has an on-open script, it's really important to have this code at the top of that script. Oops, I just cut it. I meant to copy it. So what I'm going to first do is just take that and put that in my invoice on open script. So I think I've got a trigger on first window open. And at the very top, I'm going to put that in. And what that does is if it senses that the file is being opened server-side and doing server-side processing, to stop, because otherwise the server would trigger itself and it would keep triggering it, and you'd get multiple log records made for a single action, which you certainly do not want. Okay, the second thing I'm going to do is go back to that on open script, and there's one little line of code right here, which is perform log, and it's the same thing that we saw before, except this has more details. It's tracking username, host IP, system IP, so stuff like that. And some of the information is actually getting from a couple of variables like the device ID and the login time. Login time is actually set as a global variable because I want to refer to that later on log out. So I'm going to copy these several lines of code, go to my invoice, and then paste that into my existing on open script in the invoice. Let's see, so trigger on first window open, and I'm going to put that near the bottom here. So I'll have that done kind of at the end. And then because it's already calling the same script called send log entry, in this case, I don't really even need to modify any of these things because it's just a preference. It's tracking login and it's tracking a bunch of information. I also want to track log out. So if I look at my file, if I go to my file options and script triggers, I will notice that this does not have an on window close because FileMaker didn't put that in. So I'm just going to take this one here, the whole script, just a couple of lines of code, and paste that script in into my trigger folder. Oh, that actually already came in automatically as part of my fmLog thing, but that's okay. I'll call this one. I'll give it the same naming convention that FileMaker uses. Trigger on close. Good enough. Okay, now this one tracks the connect time, which is grabbing the current time from the server, minus the login time, which got set upon login, and then doing that same send log entry script that we've seen a couple times before. I'm going to close that. Now I'm going to close my fmLog file, and I'm going to close invoices file. So if I open up invoices now, and then close it, I'll actually see, if I go to my log, a bunch of log records got made. So there's a view invoice. There's my login to the database. Let me actually modify this layout a little bit. I'm going to make the log window taller so I can see it, the log. Oh, you know what? I forgot to set that on close. Even though the script exists, I have to go to my file and actually call that on last window close. Pretty important detail there. So now if I close it and reopen it, when I go to my log, I'll see that log out and my connection time was 37 seconds. So these are great because then you can search on these and find out all your sessions. Very easy to do. Let's see. So what would it take to modify a field? So if I go into my layout and I want to track if I've changed a field. So for example, if I'm looking at a particular invoice like this Jones Tech one, and I change the type from one thing to another, I see there's already a trigger in here from something I'd started. I see that little S I didn't clean up properly. So let's try a different field. Let's go to my quantity, or unit price, even better. So if I command double click on the field, by the way, that's a nice little shortcut. If you just double click on a field, it comes up with the field definition. But if you command double click on the field, it comes up with the script triggers. And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do these, but I have found for the purposes of logging that most of the time on object save is the one that I like. And so I'm just going to call the send log entry and click edit. And then here's where I start typing what I want. I'm going to start with a total hello world example here. I'm just going to put in log equals test. Maybe just that, just to kind of see what happens. So if I go into my field and I change the unit price, let me turn on debugger here, to 200. Did I put in a different field? I may have unit price on object save. Oh, so there's the view invoice one running. That's good. I set an example that doesn't work. I love it. For some reason, that one's not being triggered. So let me revert to something that I know will, so I don't have to spend time. That might be a stacked field or something like that. Oh, it is. Look at that. So in the FileMaker example, there's actually two fields for unit price. One of them shows and one of them doesn't. And I put the trigger on the wrong one because I didn't research it carefully. So let me just, I'm going to grab this code here. Maybe I'll just delete that top field, and the bottom one is the actual editable one. And put on object save, send log entry. Now if I click into the unit price and put in 200 and tab out, there we go. So now save log entry is coming up. And then the only thing I'm going to have is just that one little bit of text. So I'm just going to let debugger run and go back to my log, and I should see test. So that's pretty much nothing. But what I really want to know is, if I click back on that invoice, I want to know two things, which is actually pretty good. So I'm going to go back into my example here because this makes it a little easier to copy and paste again. There's two functions that make this really easy to do in FileMaker. And that's get active field name and get active field contents. That makes it possible for me to copy and paste this code on any field I want very, very quickly, and it just tracks it. So I'm going to modify my log to say the ID in this case is going to be the invoice number. The type is data. And then the log text is change active field name to active field contents. So now I want that on my clipboard. And I'm just going to put that into a few other fields here. So I'll put it on date. I think actually in this case, on object save, send log entry, paste, type, on object save, send log entry, paste, terms, on object save, send log entry, delete what was there before and paste. And on due date, I'll do one more. Okay, so now I've just put that in several different fields. So how does this affect, does this slow down the situation at all for the user? So if I put in 20 quantity on today's date, it's a original invoice, it is net 30, and the due date automatically set to the 27th. I could, yeah, in this case, it's actually not editable because that gets automatically set by the script. So let's take a look at my log and see what got changed. And here we go. So there's the terms, there's the type, there's the date, and there's, so it's very, very simple. There's the viewing of the record. Really, really simple to do. Deleting a record. So let's talk about that. How do you integrate this into a script? So if I take a look at my sample script here, I'll go back to my invoice detail here, Jones Tech. And right now, I can just hit delete. Kind of not a good idea to allow this in a lot of FileMaker solutions. So to track deleting, I would need to take over that command using custom menus, or just put a button on the layout that does deleting and then take away the ability for that user class privilege set to delete users. And I see a question in here that actually points to something earlier, which is that I can assign a script trigger to multiple fields at once. So I could have actually saved myself considerable time on my layout by selecting a bunch of fields and setting that trigger all at one time. That's a very, very good hint. I don't think I knew that. That's why I love doing these. Anyway, let's go back to this delete script. I'm trying to watch the questions in real time as we do this as well. Okay, so for the delete script, I'll take a look, and in my fmLog, I've got a couple of sample scripts down here, examples. And there's one called delete company. I'm going to change that to delete invoice. And it comes up and says permanently delete this invoice. And if I say, if the get last message choice is 2, which is delete, which is not 2, sorry, then it exits, doesn't do anything. Otherwise, it tracks a variable called log, and this doesn't work right now. So this is actually tracking what it is that I'm tracking. So I'll delete the comment fields here and put in delete invoice. And then here is where I'm putting in the company name for the invoice. And then I can track other things here as well, like, for example, date equals date. And then I could put in any other details about this invoice that I want. So, for example, and type is type. Terms. I don't want to do too many of these, but just to give you the example, terms is terms. Okay, so now I'm using this to make it a little bit simpler to call the log script because I can copy and paste these. Then I can just have the same script I can copy and paste all over the place that just does send log entry. And the type can be set to delete or view or whatever. And then it just sets the log to $log. In this case also, I have to modify the ID to the invoice ID. So this script could then be easily called by any action anywhere in the invoice table without changing anything for any kind of deleting related records or deleting. Okay, so then after it makes that log entry, it then deletes the record. So then I simply have to put that onto a button, make a button, delete, runs a script called, and the example scripts delete invoice. And I don't even need to send a parameter. right? So in this case, I don't have to worry about the parameter to the script at all because the script does all the work for me. That is bad placement of that button. So if I come up with one I want to delete, I just click delete. Pops up with an error message. Do you really want to do that? Yes, I do. Could have turned script trigger on there, but didn't. So if I go to my log, oh, here we go, delete Jones Tech. So the last record was made because after deleting it, I then viewed the other invoice. So really simply, I now have a record that tracks that I deleted something and what all the information that I cared about was about that thing I deleted. Super useful. I mean, really useful. There are so many times in my career that people have asked me who deleted the record and what was it before. And once it's gone, the only way to get it is to go back to a backup of your FileMaker database, which is a hassle. So this is just so much simpler. Okay, so I'm going to go back to slides and kind of blow through that. And then I want to leave plenty of space available to answer questions at the end. So let's see. So in summary, know information about your system. Who's using it? How are they using it? Be able to do reports on that and query on it. Find out what scripts and layouts are being used and what aren't. That allows you as a developer to know what parts to focus on as you do development because you know how your users are using your system. Once you know that, make changes, and you actually you're targeting your work to the areas that really matter. I think that's extremely important. That's really the impetus behind this. Here's my contact info, app.works, our phone number there. So next month, there's going to be a webinar from Jeremiah Hammond from DB Services. He's doing a section from the FTS FileMaker training book on data, talking about the relationship graphs, context, some very, very good things there. And these are some of the topics he'll be hitting. So after that, I'll go ahead and take any questions for a little bit here. And if you want, we can try different integrations of this and what it would look like in the system. Let's see, I already see a bunch of questions here. Can we also log the original value plus the new value? Oh, I love that question. Maybe you guys have a little bit better answer on that. But the way that I figured out to do that before is, in the past, is to use two script triggers. You use one script trigger that stores a global variable with the information that it is right now. And then when you actually call that script on the object save script, you go grab that previous variable, which tells you the previous value. That way, in a single line of log entry, you can get the before value and after value. So changed company name from X to Y. I don't know if there's a way to do that in a single script step. If there is, I would love to know it. But that's the way that I've done it, is with two triggers. To audit. Another question was, to audit changes to a field requires a script trigger on every layout where the field appears. Which is true. That's the way, that's a principle of the system. And the question is, how can I audit the field on anywhere, anytime? Maybe by a script or maybe on the layout. Well, first of all, you kind of can't, because some of the ways that you can change values in FileMaker could be difficult to log. For example, it could be done by a SQL command from ODBC. It could be done from PHP. It could be done from a user on a layout in FileMaker. It could be done by someone who has direct access to the data file. It could be done by a script that does a set field command. There's so many different ways. The only way to do that would be to have a plugin based method to do it, of which there are several. But yeah, to track it by any different mechanism, that's how you would do it. I think that that's, for me, if I go into the database and I discover that there's for example, the company name field in 10% of the records of 10,000 records, people put a space in after the name, and all I want to do is go clean those spaces. I don't want log entry made for every single one of those changes, which would happen if you had a plugin-based logging system. So, but that is a very, very good question. So this is a very user interface based system when it comes to that. So it's tracking changes on a layout made by a user that they intend to change. That's what it does. Let's see, transactions. So this is a question from Volker. So if you have a transaction where you're rolling up, if I understand the question correctly, where you're rolling up several different changes at once, like for example, if you create an invoice and 4 line items all at one time, and you want to track all of that information at once, you'd really kind of have to load up all of those things to like a single variable and then write that as one single step. The way that we built this is designed to be a sort of on the other end of the spectrum, to be integrated in a natural database where the user can go in and change a field directly. Actually, Vince Bonanno has done some really good work on another logging system that he's been showing touring around the country. And his is very transactional, so I recommend that you check that out. The next question was, if you edit several fields before committing the record, does it log all of the changes? So it actually tracks them one at a time. As soon as you tab out of the field with the on-record save, that immediately logs that. It doesn't do it. It doesn't wait. It does it one at a time. The benefit there, remember, you can do 600 of those a second, so it's not really going to, on a pretty low-end server, you're not really going to run out of that. And the benefit is you can then track and say, how many changes have there been to this particular field? You can really parse and search your log database. Another way to do that, though, would be to have like a global pop-up. And so you could have, rather than editing your address field here, you could pop up a global, or like a popover button, for example, with a bunch of global fields on it. And then a single button that commits that change. And then you're tracking all of those kind of in one log record rather than individual ones. Oh, the keyboard combination for a paragraph return, I think that's Command. I just do it sort of naturally. Command P? No, that's print. When you're in, when I was scripting, when you're writing code here, you can, I was testing something, test. Oh, yeah. It's Option ampersand on the Mac. That puts in the paragraph signal. And I just do that one automatically. The paragraph, the Pilcrow character, rather than having to select it from the menu over here on the side. A little tip. Suggestions for archiving logs after the log table gets a lot of records. Some of our customers have 10 million or so log records, and that's not touching at all the capabilities of what FileMaker can handle. FileMaker can handle, I've done personally 10 billion record tables. And the speed of FileMaker doesn't change at all based on the number of records in a table. However, you could archive it. And if you are going to have a huge log table, I would recommend that you actually have the log file in its own data file. So the log table in its own data file, which then gives you the ability to secure it differently than your primary solution. For example, in a public health kind of a solution, you might have several developers working on it, but you really only want to have one or two people have access to cover their tracks by deleting log records, or it's not that that's any kind of a real thing, but it's still a very good idea. Since the log itself is kind of a black box, it doesn't have any parts that you have to change, putting it in a separate file, I think, would be a good way to do it. Let's see, when deleting an invoice record, can you list the line item so that the invoice could be recreated down the road if needed? Yes, that's a really good question. So you could use like a list function, or you could have your script actually just go to the related records and grab all the information from each of the line items and either create individual log records for the line item before deleting them, or roll that up into the single log record. So I think another thing you're hitting at here, Jason, is that it's not really designed to do an undo, like a full, like a click a button and it restores it back. There are some plugins that do that, that are designed to be kind of roll forward, roll back logging. This is not one of those. This is really designed to be English readable logging, so that if you did have to undo it, you'd have to go manually redo it. Let's see. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch more questions here. This is great. So another one, would it be possible to modify the field log to show the original value too? I think I hit that one a little earlier. Yes, you can do that, but you have to do it with 2 triggers unless someone can fix that. Is it feasible to trigger a log entry in field definitions? I don't think so. So there might be a plugin method to do that, but I don't think you can do that to track like when a user created a field in a table, for example. Tom Fitch says this looks familiar. That's because it's kind of it started life in a project that Tom, you and I worked on years ago. Let's see. Oh, I got a question about the contact details. So let me bring that slide back up here. You guys can contact me. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is downloadable for free today on app.works. Issues related to drag and drop modification. That's a very good question. I think that still triggers scripts normally in FileMaker. So if you drag and drop something in a field, it just works. I'd have to look at that. How would it look to have a log as a standalone file to avoid bloat? Yes, I think I talked about that one a second ago as well. I think that's actually a very good idea if you think your log is going to get large. Someone gave me a little tip for something using execute SQL from a Soliant website using named buckets. I'll have to take a look at that one later. Let's see, Scott says, I take it that the ID foreign field would be used to capture the primary ID of a table from which a record is modified or deleted for finding historical changes. Yes, that is exactly the point of the ID foreign. So you're tracking the primary key in the table where the thing is happening. Oh, man, 2 questions to that one in a row. Let's see. Current discussion about safe field logging. Look at the idea of SuperLog. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different log systems out there. So SuperLog is a great one from Ray Culligan, which has it's definitely so like on the spectrum of like simple logging tools to complex logging tools. We very much aimed fmLog to be all the way at the end of the simple part of that spectrum. And Ray's SuperLog is very powerful. Definitely not at the simple end, I think. But also another excellent thing has been available for years. Let's see, if doing a before value, how would you deal with moving between fields before the commit? So this is a question about if you're using 2 script variables and you want to track the before and after. So you can see, like for example, if I click into a field, I'm saying, oh, I just clicked into maybe I'll go and look at that real quickly. I don't have that actually working in this solution, the before and after, but I do have that running, and we have implemented it that way in several customers. So if I have a trigger that says when I click into this field, I've clicked into the address field and the current value of that is this particular address. Then if I simply click out to another field where I then start making a change to Franklin Rose, Michigan, I would need to then track not only, I'd need to track the name of the field I'm currently in, because I no longer care about the value of the one that I was in before. So you do have to put a little bit of thought into that. You don't want to have a gigantic variable that has every single before and after value, because it could get pretty bad. But yes, you have to have a system in, and when we've implemented that feature, implemented this in that way, the before and after value, we've had to think about that. Another comment here was that it will only take a little bit more time to track the elapsed time of a script, since you're calling script calls anyway. That's an excellent, excellent suggestion. So that would be basically at the beginning of a script, you would grab the UTC time or like the server time or something like that in a variable. And then at the end of the script, when the script is finished executing, when you make your log entry, you say finished executing script, get script name. And here's the duration of the time that the script took to run, which then gives you some very, very easy way to track how long it took that script to run. Great, great suggestion. Good one, Kent. Okay. Another suggestion of more complicated than this would be to use a local value versus the server value to track before and after changes. I thought about that, but I don't know exactly how that works. So that's another one from Tom, so I'd love to talk to you about that. So in other words, if you click into a value, you may be able to get, and then you commit the log record, you could go to the server and find out what the value is for that record first. Because it hadn't been sent to the server yet, it's just a little too tricky. I haven't figured that one out. Let's see, another question of whether there's a way to log reverts, and that one I haven't really thought about yet. So that's basically if you go in and do a bunch of things like make a new record and type some stuff in, which actually all of those are making log records, but then if I say record revert, that's going to delete the entire record. Didn't. But that could delete the entire record depending upon how I did that. And I'm not really tracking that. Let's see, if we put fmLog into a control file separately from the original file, would we allow logging without going out of current layout and back again? So this is a really good thing. So we're talking about if you have a separate file or a data file or something like that, the script that does the logging should go into the table where the data is. And so it's actually a beautiful thing in FileMaker to call a script in a window that's not in the current solution, because it doesn't come to the front. So in other words, if I am in here in my invoice sample file, I could call the logging script in the fmLog file, and it goes to the correct layout, makes a record, and just invisibly does that. It never comes to the front. I would actually submit that that's kind of a best practice for logging. If you have if you're going to use that extra file, if the extra file doesn't cost you, I think that's actually a really, really good way to do it. I've got quite a few more questions here, so I'm probably going to go till, this was scheduled to go till 11:45, which is now. I'll go for 15 more minutes and keep asking questions, and I'll take any other questions offline on that one. Okay, after that, let's see, does this work only in FileMaker 15? It definitely works in any version of FileMaker all the way back to, I don't know, I guess probably 12 or before. As soon as script triggers came out, and even before script triggers, this goes back to old versions. A couple people are saying option 7. That's the keyboard shortcut for that. Option 7 is the option ampersand. Yes, option 7. That's the keyboard shortcut for the Pilcrow. Let's see. By the way, I neglected to mention at the beginning of this, I was supposed to do this webinar last week, and I'd like to really apologize for the people who showed up last week when it was supposed to happen, because there was a total time snafu. It was my fault, and I'm really sorry. So thanks for everyone for coming back today. Let's see. Some people lost contact of the webinar and then had to get back in, so I missed 15 minutes. So this is recorded, and the recording of the webinar will be posted later today at the FileMaker Academy website. Another question is, what if the user cancels all the changes? And that's that same revert question, I think. Those log records are there. So even if a user does something, changes it, and then deletes it, they're there. I think that there's an interesting application of this, which is a user who's trying to steal. I don't take me as a dark person or anything like that, but I have in my career seen this happen one time with a client where someone was creating an invoice, printing it out, giving it to a client, taking money for the thing that they sold, and then deleting the invoice from the system and the payment record from the system and putting the money in their pocket. There's no invoice record. If you look really super carefully, there's maybe a gap in the invoice, but the logging is actually there. So if the user has no ability or no knowledge that this is happening, this is a perfect way to catch that kind of bad user behavior. Maybe not a leading feature of it, but definitely something that I think is good. Let's see, if a user edits multiple fields, tapping between them before commit, are individual logs created for each field. So the commit is actually at the field level. The on-object save is a field level thing. It's not a record level thing. And so the log happens as they tab from field to field is the answer to that one. And so that means that's the same thing with revert record. It does not revert those log changes. Another good point here is that the log file should actually be a separate file, so that if the log gets corrupted or the main file gets corrupted, they are independent from each other, and it doesn't hurt the rest of the solution. You also bring up a really good point here, Scott, that the log file gets big. The log very frequently will be as big as the rest of the solution. And so if you're going to have a lot of records and you're going to track a lot of little detail, know that it'll actually get really large, because the whole point of the log text, this main field, is to be indexed. And by being indexed, it's going to be larger. It's searchable by definition. Let's see. Can you do error logging? So if you revert the main record due to an error, but then commit the log. I'm not sure if I understand what that one means, but yeah, we've talked about commit record. Let's see. Some of these are comments here, not questions, but there's a bunch more. Drag and drop does trigger on the modify. I would think that it would do on save as well, but I'm not sure. Someone's commenting on that. Do I track the internal table ID and or the internal layout ID? I don't, but you certainly can. So that's tracking the invisible IDs of things that aren't normally on layouts, but you certainly can get those at the time you make log records. By the way, I'm only using these 6 fields here, but you could certainly have more. For example, if you're going to have a ton of log records, you could have a code field and then a code lookup table. And so, for example, code 10 can be edit a field, code 11 delete, create a record, delete a record, view a script, or execute a script, view a layout, any kind of like that. You can give them code numbers rather than a type text field. And tons of other fields can be created in that table as well. Someone mentioned when timing scripts use the micro time, so that would be the get UTC milliseconds, I believe, which tracks it in very, very small increments, much smaller than 1 second. Let's see. Someone's commenting about WebDirect, saying the last time you did a WebDirect solution, you couldn't have custom menus. That's a very good point. WebDirect does not, at the moment, supports custom menus, which means you can't take over the delete functionality if you show the menus. What I have found to get around that is I never, ever on a WebDirect solution allow the user to see any of the normal FileMaker interface. So I lock the toolbars and lock all that stuff away, and then create buttons for all the normal stuff that the user would see. Otherwise, the user can have access to things like delete all records that I don't really want them to see. So someone's mentioning with the correct values, you could use this tool to make a rollback log. You absolutely could. So you could write it in such a way to make it a rollback, roll forward kind of a log. HIPAA requires a separate file for logging. So that's a very good point, Steve. So for best practicing, you really have to have a separate file for logging. And I think that kind of goes to Scott's point a little earlier too about that being a good idea anyway, because if the server goes down and you have to recover the file, you really want only one to be damaged because they both have, essentially, they both have all the same information. Let's see. You have to have FileMaker 15 to run the download. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe that's something about I'm not really sure. Jude, I'll have to get back to you on that one. Can you enhance this for scripting by rolling a human readable log through a global variable and then writing to that as the parameter? You certainly can. So the other thing about this is it's designed to be very, very easy to enhance, to track lots of details in scripting. So frequently we do tracking at multiple points in a script. Like if you've got a really big export script, track at the beginning, began the export script. And the second point, have an error, I didn't find the correct number of records for this thing. And another one, successfully got past phase B, part 1. And then at the very, very end, completed export of 6,523 records, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the path I exported to. So things like that could certainly be very easily done in a script. You can call many, many log entries from one script. Let's see. Someone's mentioning about JSON formatting, which would be really nice to track to be able to parse log entries out. I totally agree. Yep, another question on revert record. So I think what's coming up here is a revert record event. I don't know if FileMaker actually has a trigger for on revert record, but that would be very interesting. So if a user goes into something and deletes, and then rather than does undo, they do a revert record revert. I don't know what kind of an event that is, but that's very intriguing to be able to make a log entry for that reversion. Someone asked if our website is WebDirect. The main website is not, but actually when you download fmLog from app.works, you're actually downloading the file from a WebDirect FileMaker database. Even though they say not to do that for a public-facing database, we're doing it anyway. Eat your own dog food. Let's see. Lots of people saying thank you, and I say thank you to you for attending. Minimum version of the fmLog file is 14. Oh, that's a good point. If anyone is using a version of FileMaker, so the file at the moment we've actually set to require FileMaker 14, but I'll happily uncheck that so that you can open it in an older version if you would like that. I don't know why we set that to 14, but we did. Let's see. Oh, does it make a log entry when a user loses connection, like for FileMaker Go? That actually doesn't, that's happening at the server level. And so you can actually search the FileMaker server log for error type 51 and error type 10, which is the two different errors that FileMaker makes when someone loses connection to FileMaker server. But those can't be tracked at the user interface level because the user interface just disappears and isn't actually connected to the server to make such a log record. Someone else points out on the revert record script that I could just make, or in the revert record issue, that I could just make a button that reverts the record and then track that in the script that's called from that button. Good one, Thomas. Let's see, what would I recommend for an external log file? One log for multiple solutions or an individual log per solution? That's an interesting question. I would depending upon how independent those solutions are, I would probably say independent log files per solution. Like if one's for accounting and one's for sales, definitely separate ones per solution. But if they're all sort of for the same, group of people, maybe one. I think that's really kind of specific on your situation. Let's see. The block menu revert and use a button. So someone says, yeah, that's the way to get around that problem. Just don't let users revert record and put a button. How hard would it be to right-click and view the history of changes in each field? Oh, that's a good one. So you could use an execute. So I think what the idea there is you've got these log records here. Like, for example, I'm looking at one for a field change. I changed the field type on the invoice. And so if I'm looking at my invoice here, and I hover over my type field, I kind of want to see what changes, in a tooltip that shows me the history of changes for that field. I fear that might be a little heavy, kind of a query to run. You could do that with an execute SQL right in the tooltip. You could also do that a couple of other ways. You could on record load up you could do a query like server side and then get all the information for the history of changes for that record and then put those into different variables by field. That'd be another way to do that. I love that question. That's a great idea. I don't know if it'd be a little hard maybe, but it would be totally doable, I would say. So let's see, we already have a quest for getting it in 13. So Judy, I'll take care of that and give that to you for 13. And someone told me that there actually is an on-record revert trigger. Kent, thank you. I've learned 2 things today at least. Let's see. So someone says that, FileMaker 14 is required for perform script on server. So Judy, when I provide you your FileMaker 13 version of this, it will have the perform script on server stuff taken out. One log file for each solution. Surely someone answered that question that came up earlier. And then we have an execute SQL, and now this is finally the last question. So perfect, we ended just before 1 hour. So using an execute SQL and a magic value list would be nice from the dropdown. So you could actually kind of, look at a field and see its history of changes. Yeah, that would be a really good thing. So this is version 1.0 of this out to the world. It's released for free on a Creative Commons license, so you can put it in your solution and modify it to your heart's content. You could put it into a commercial solution and sell it. Don't try to sue me for the copyright or anything like that, but it's yours to use, and I really hope that you find as much utility in your solutions as we have in ours. And I thank everyone for their time today.